Imagine you're sitting at home, minding your own business, when the government suddenly knocks on your door and says, "Hey, congrats. You're now the proud landlord of 3 soldiers. They'll be sleeping in your bed, eating your food, raiding your liquor cabinet, and no, you don't get a choice." That was the reality for the colonists under British rule. Before the Revolution, the Crown passed the Quartering Acts that forced Americans to house and feed British soldiers, sometimes in their own homes. It wasn't just inconvenient, it was insulting. Soldiers were a constant reminder that the king didn't trust you and your house really wasn't yours. The framers hated it so much, they locked in a permanent no trespassing sign into the Constitution. Welcome to our republic.
When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands that
sailors and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers. Not one small step for man.
Those three hallowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
we pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
The Third Amendment, quartering soldiers. No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Short, sharp, crystal clear, but let's unpack it. No quartering in peace. This was a big one. In peacetime, the government had zero authority to force you to house troops. It doesn't matter if it's 1 soldier or 50. Your home is yours. Think about how radical this was. In Europe, kings had armies and did whatever they wanted. Troops were routinely dumped into civilian homes, a quick and cheap way to support the military. The colonists had lived it firsthand, and they wanted no part of it in this new republic. This section was about ownership. It reinforced the idea that private property is sacred. In war, only by law, right? Framers weren't stupid. They knew war comes with chaos, right? During an invasion, soldiers might need shelter fast. But even then, quartering couldn't happen unless Congress passed law. That means the legislative branch, not the military, decides how it's done. The generals don't just commandeer your barn. The people's representatives have to sign off first. This safeguard wasn't about politics. It was about preventing military rule. And why it mattered again in 1787, to us, the Third Amendment, it feels more like a relic. But in 1787, this was a hot wound, right? Colonists remembered British troops being shoved into their homes after the Quartering Acts of 1765 and 1774. In New York, tensions got so bad that soldiers were crammed into taverns and even private homes, sparking riots. In Boston, quartering was one of the grievances that fanned the flames of leading to the Revolution. And for ordinary families, it wasn't just space, it was money. You had to feed the soldiers, repair the damage, and watch strangers in red coats trample through your life. For the framers, banning quartering wasn't just about privacy, it was about dignity. The Third Amendment set a precedent. The government stays out of your home. That principle later shaped the Fourth Amendment, no unreasonable searches, and the general idea of right to privacy. In fact, some courts have actually referenced the third when discussing modern privacy cases. Proof that even an amendment nobody talks about is still quietly shaping constitutional law today. Now, believe it or not, there are a handful of Third Amendment cases. In 1982, a family in New York sued after National Guardsmen were housed in their apartment after a police strike. The courts said, yep, this might actually be a Third Amendment issue. More recently, some people have tried to argue that police officers who occupy homes during raids as soldiers. Courts haven't gone far enough to show that, but it shows the Third Amendment still pops up, right? So while you don't see protests about quartering anymore, the amendment isn't dead. It's just lurking, ready to be pulled off the shelf when needed. The Third Amendment doesn't draw headlines, right? Nobody's storming the Supreme Court demanding quartering reform. But for the framers, it was deadly serious. They had lived under an empire where soldiers in your house meant submission and humiliation. They swore it would never happen again in the United States. Again, I know this one is a super, super short one. The amendment is pretty self-explanatory, right? There's not much you need to go into, at least on this show. You can go and study it yourself, right? But again, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. It really, really means a lot to me. Just remember, history isn't boring, right? Especially when one short amendment turned every American home into a fortress that the government couldn't breach. Take care. See you next time.